Story 1. I always ask about training and learning curves. Every job I've had that went wrong, I noticed that when that question came up, they stumbled. The current job I have, when I asked the question, they had sparks in their eyes as they explained the whole process from day one of shadowing to the transition to working solo. And even when COVID-19 hit, they managed to continue without skipping a beat. Story 2. I was interviewed by a senior programmer and the department head. The department head was continuously making condescending remarks towards the other interviewer. The poor guy just sounded broken. I hope he's somewhere else now. Story 3. Once an interviewer directly asked me if I had any trouble working for free on weekends. I told them my free time is more valuable than anything, and that the only way I would work a weekend is if they are paying me and if I felt like working a weekend. She got really mad at me and ended the interview immediately. It was the biggest red flag I've ever seen because they didn't even try to hide it. Story 4. I was once part of a group onboarding for an information technology job. They handed us all the one-page new hire contract, and everyone except me signed immediately. When I read the paperwork, I discovered we were signing a mystery document. Clauses included, I agree to abide by the personal search and seizure security policy. Attached. Without other pages, there was no way to determine what I was agreeing to. I kept requesting more and more pages until the human resources representative said, okay, I guess a name is just determined to hold everyone up. We will handle you separately if you're struggling so much. After I walked out and drove home, I called the hiring manager to apologize for not taking the job. He informed me that human resources reported I had walked out after refusing to be drug tested. Story 5. Last job I worked. Yeah, everyone here is new, but it's totally because of COVID. The boss doesn't like people going out to get lunch because they're afraid you'll never come back. So bring your own lunch. You'll get weird looks if you leave on time. It was a Chinese-owned company with a heavy Chinese work culture influence, so you were expected to stay overtime all week. Also, the people here are nice, but it's pretty stressful. Estimate of arrival time. Also, I was told by my trainer, you want to know the best advice I can give you? Find another job. This was like my second week in. Story 6. This actually happened to me. Interviewer. Do you have any questions for us? Me. What is a challenge this department has recently faced? Interviewer. Job security. Story 7. Besides always hiring, they seem almost overly eager to say, yes, we can do that, to everything you ask. No job will have literally everything you want. And if your intuition is telling you they seem to be promising a bit more than they can offer, they likely are. Story 8. When you are signing all the forms they give you and you are taking your time to read over every document so that you can fully understand what you are getting into, people come in and start telling you that you don't need to read this and that, just sign here and so on. Story 9. I did not know it at the time, but you will be wearing many hats was a sign that they were going to give me the work of 4 positions and the wage of 1. I did not last a year there before I left, and now I will not even finish reading job advertisements that include that line. Story 10. My current boss gave me a great tip on the last interview I had. He said, ask them if you can pick an employee to chat with about how they like the position you're applying for. They'll give a better impression of the place than management. I got the job I was interviewing for, but I turned it down because the above is the kind of management I want to keep in my life. Also, the place undercut my pay offer, which is certainly a red flag. Story 11. I once showed up for an interview, and the manager wasn't there that day. No one called me to let me know. The assistant manager was not apologetic for the scheduling issue at all. She was literally just like, oh, she's not here today, in a tone that suggested I should somehow already know that. She said they would call me to reschedule sometime the next week. I told her I was currently unavailable Monday to Wednesday but could come in anytime Thursday to Friday. She said if I couldn't make time for the interview, I probably wouldn't be a good fit. I said okay and went on to my other interviews, ending up working elsewhere. You'd think that would be the end of it, but both the manager and the assistant manager badmouthed me to a few other people in the industry, including one of my friends. Hello? I made time for an interview. You disrespected me by not calling me to let me know it was canceled. I gave you the times I was available to reschedule, and that was disrespectful somehow. Story 12. Jobs where the expectations of the position are not clear. The person hiring you should be able to give a clear idea of your responsibilities day to day in a practical way. It shows that the company understands what it wants out of the position. I have worked a couple of positions that had a really hard time figuring out who was supposed to do what, which led to a lot of confusion, and both of them had this in the interviews. If the company you are working for cannot define what success in that position looks like, you will not be able to either. Story 13. When you ask, "What do you like about working here?" and the interviewer talks about the location of the job, saying, "It's a great place to live," instead of the actual job. Story 14. I interviewed for an independent contractor position on a piece rate. It's hard to predict how much you're going to earn on a piece rate, so to attract me, the manager showed me some pay stubs from his team. I noticed that, 1, he could easily cherry-pick pay stubs to show me his best employees' best weeks. All that tells me is that I'm likely to make less than what he's showing me, at least on average. 2, the pay stubs were obviously designed to be confusing. They were a full page and absolutely covered in data. He wanted me to be impressed by a dollar amount, not accounting for costs which the contractor has to carry or taxes which the contractor has to deduct and pay, but he took them away before anyone could have deciphered what the pay period, piece rate, number of jobs, or kilometers was. 3, he showed me other people's pay stubs. Another red flag is that they were desperate to hire because they didn't have enough contractors to deliver the work contracts they'd already sold. I had 2 people from different offices call me after I'd declined the position who apparently still thought I was considering it. Story 15. At my last place of work, the person interviewing me had a printed cartoon on their wall of someone who looked like a bomb had blown up in their face with the caption, "I spoke with the boss about it. I guess we're still doing it." That wasn't subtle at all, but I ignored it. The boss was an absolute tyrant who wouldn't listen to her staff, consider changing her mind about anything, or let people do the work they were best suited to do. She wouldn't show up for weeks at a time. The job itself was decent, but she was the worst boss I've ever had. Story 16. I was once told, sometimes the hourly workers go on strike, and they lock us in to keep the production line running, but management brings us steaks, and we have an informal agreement with the unions, so you can cross the picket lines once a week to visit your wife. Story 17. I had an interview once. The owner of the company told me he was going to hire me, let the man in the office train me, then fire that man once I was up to speed. He also told me that sometimes employees have to hold their paycheck. The final capper, not that I needed it, I had already decided not to work for him, was he told me I looked like his nephew. I am female. Story 18. Employees are either new hires or have been there for over 15 years, with no in-between. There is no room for improvement. It's better to leave for advancement. Story 19. Everyone looks tired. Also, you don't see anyone in your department before working in it, other than the boss. I made this mistake a few times. It was one of the worst jobs. Story 20. When they feel the need to reassure you in the interview that at that company, they work hard, but also play hard. They don't play hard. It's a sweatshop, and they're just trying to convince you that it's anything but one. Story 21. I came in for a job interview at 7:30 p.m. The entire staff was still in the office. I should have known right then that a 9 to 5 schedule was never going to happen. One day I worked until 2:30 a.m. to finish up a big project, and my boss said to me I could come in an hour later the next morning. Gee, thanks, with my public transport and travel time, that gives me a solid 2 hours of sleep instead of just 1. With all the stories in the reactions to this post, I just wanted to say that there really are good employers out there. Do not stand by being treated so poorly, because you deserve to be treated with respect. For any employers reading this thread, here are a few examples of how to create a loyal, healthy employee base. My current employer puts family first. If there is an emergency at home, they tell you to handle that first. For example, when I was miscarrying, they told me, "I don't want to see you in the next 2 weeks at least. Take your time and give me a call when you feel ready to come back in." Okay? 9 to 5 means 9 to 5. If you have to leave early for something or come in later because of something, they expect you to take your own responsibility and don't even check if you actually catch up the lost time. They just expect that you do. By doing so, you create that on the rare occasion that you do have to stay late to finish something, you do that without complaining because it only happens incidentally and not structurally, and certainly isn't expected. In fact, they ask if you really have to stay late or if you just think you have to stay late. If you both give and take, you're much more likely to give back. They frequently and genuinely ask about your well-being and then also follow that up. If you tell them your mother is unwell, they ask about her a week later. It's not lost in the abyss that is business. No, you feel seen and heard. You look stressed. Is there anything I can do? Do you want to go over your to-do list together and prioritize what needs to be done first? Things like this mean the world. One time they walked in and said, "Hey, my afternoon meeting got canceled. I know you have like 15 files that need checking, and I've seen how full your calendar is. Why don't you give me 4, and I'll make sure they get sent out today to lighten your load a little." They focus on little tokens of appreciation. A chocolate Easter bunny waiting on your desk at Easter. Last year they hid 10 Easter eggs in every room. I found one hidden in the box of my crackers. They make sure your salary is paid before Christmas even though you normally don't get paid before the 26th. They make sure every secretary gets flowers on Secretary Day. They bought us weird pens, think bright neon color with dangly beads on top, just because they thought it would brighten up our days. It only costs a penny, but it makes your staff feel seen. When there's a heat wave, they treat us with popsicles. When it's holiday season, they randomly decide to close the office at noon on December 31st. If we have to earn it in the last couple of hours of this day, we're doing something wrong. So let's shut down for the day. Have a good one, guys. They do not tolerate gossip. We talk with each other, not about each other. They hire capable staff. People who are not putting in the work or effort do not last. They will ask us about people's progress, like, "What do you think about the new receptionist?" And we can answer frankly, even if our opinion is that they're not making enough progress, etc. They want to know what we think and they value our input. This creates a healthy work environment with driven people who all have a heart for the cause. Mistakes are human, and we solve them together without talking negatively about the person responsible. Of course, we all have our bad days, and it's okay to mope and murmur here and there to your coworker, but we really try to keep that to an absolute minimum. Story 22. We do not like clock watchers here. We expect everyone to be committed. Expecting more work for no extra pay. Getting mad at you when you leave at 5 even though your stated work hours end at 5. Story 23. I once turned down a job offer because they mentioned that the previous person in the position had quit after a few months, and most of the people I interviewed with seemed stressed out. Story 24. They dodge questions on pay, meaning they do not pay enough for what they expect of you. The word family, in reference to the employees, means they want you to work lots of unpaid overtime. Also, if they keep talking about the experience you will gain, that is also code for "we know we are going to be underpaying you." Story 25. I went into an interview for a low-level administrative position, and they made me put my cell phone in a bucket up front, stating, "No phones are allowed in the back. It reduces productivity." Big nope for me. Story 26. I had a job interview with 2 people asking questions. One of them brought questions for the wrong position. Things I found out later. The person on the information technology team who had been with the company longest had been there just under a year. Their turnover was higher than McDonald's, over 50% turnover annually. They had a goal to get it down to 40%. Bonuses only get paid 1 year after you've been there for a full calendar year, and that only starts counting on January 1st. If you get hired January 2nd, 2020, you wouldn't get your first bonus until 2022. There was no manager for the programmers. There was no director for the information technology team. They had tracking software for your every keystroke, idle time, and programs you were active in. They would question idle time, which meant people on the phone with clients would be questioned often because their computers would be idle. There was a lot going wrong, but the interview slip-up wasn't enough to really give it away in time. Suffice it to say they didn't meet their turnover reduction goal. Story 27. I once interviewed for a job where the interviewer actually directly told me that the job was extremely stressful and they had a series of new hires quit within a month or 2. The job was at a psychiatric hospital. I thanked her for being honest with me and said that I was not interested. As she was walking me out, she leaned in and said, You're doing the right thing. Our last hire quit because he said he was having palpitations all the time here and was worried he would have a heart attack. About 3 years later, at another company, I saw one of the women who had interviewed me. She worked in a totally different position in a totally different setting. She said that the other woman who had interviewed me, the one who gave me the warning, actually did suffer a heart attack. She survived and she stopped working there. I was so thankful she warned me. Most interviewers wouldn't do that. In thinking more about that woman, obviously, she was very stressed and she was having to cover work for that position that needed to be filled. She could have easily and understandably gone into survival mode and thought, you know what, let's just hire her, meaning me, and then at least I will have some relief for a month or two until this one quits too. But she didn't do that. She thought of my welfare, a stranger, over her own interests. And clearly, she was suffering. I would have relocated for that job too, about 150 miles. She was aware of that. Maybe that played into her decision to warn me, maybe not. Either way, she was an extraordinary person.